babies. Look at them. Look at all their little rolls and chubby cheeks. They are just happiness personified as little bags of meat who sit in their own
Being child-free by choice is actually a thing, y'all.
It's becoming more and more common where you'll ask somebody or you guys are talking about children and they're like, I don't think it's a fit for me.
And I have not heard one man yet declare that they don't want children, but I have been hearing more women say, I don't know.
I feel like millennials, we really are thinking in terms of practicality and not just like because society says we should do it, we should do it.
The societal pressure.
Exactly.
If I'm being honest, there's still a little bit that lingers.
Of course.
From the conditioning from our parents. And they're usually the ones who are questioning, when are we going to have kids? I want my grandbabies. That's the part that prevents some of us from fully declaring, I don't want kids. I'm not having kids.
Yeah.
You don't have to look very far on the internet these days to find conversations of young ladies talking about, and some even celebrating, their decision to go child-free. What's interesting to me is that on the one end, I can understand it practically because it's extremely expensive to have a child these days. But if you're in a family and you're working together, you probably find a way to make that work. But on the other end, there's no necessary sacrifice. With the swallowing of a pill that is very cheap or in many places free, young ladies can essentially have the life that they would have had decades prior with their husband, except they're doing it with the men of their choosing, the ones that they find physically appealing. And of course, this is going to have wide-ranging effects because these young ladies who previously would have married a man and built a family with them have left a generation, maybe even a second generation of men, single and looking for bigger purpose other than gathering money and playing video games. And these changes in society are being noticed by some very powerful people using some very familiar terms.
We've talked before about your video, the coming right-wing backlash. We've talked about the kind of the conditions and the catalysts that would be necessary to actually see society kind of break down in ways that neither of us want to see it go. And I grew up in a world where concepts of traditional masculinity were still respected. It's not that we weren't still contending with feminism, but feminism was still, for the most part, mainstream feminism was still rooted in this idea of, look, opening up access to opportunities, breaking glass ceilings, things of that nature. It wasn't full-blown man hatred. I agree with you that this is not sustainable. You can't have a society where you've just told, traditional masculinity and men in general that you're always part of the problem and the solution is for you to become more feminine or whatever it is, just don't be you. And then at the same time, expect the same very young men that you expect to police the streets, fight your wars, build your buildings, maintain your infrastructure, to continue to do so just out of a sense of, noble duty to a society that increasingly hates them.
When I first saw Nick Freitas in my YouTube feed, my first thought was, maybe this is some fringe YouTuber with some very radical views. But then when I saw that he has 1 million subscribers, I chose to do a little bit more digging. And this gentleman is a member of the Virginia House of Representatives. They call it the House of Delegates. He's married, he has 3 children, and he's an influencer as well as a lawmaker. And to hear a lawmaker who also has a very distinguished military background speak the way he did in this video was something that it made me step back a bit and think maybe some things are moving faster or in a way that we just haven't really considered yet. For someone in his position to speak the way he spoke in this interview really opened my eyes.
The left has done so by basically just appealing to young women because that's a demographic where they can consistently pull loyalty from. But as they've gotten more insecure, they've had to appeal to women in more and more insane ways, which in turn disaffects young men. But they haven't really thought that far ahead.
And they were more pissed at us saying illegal immigrant, it's our undocumented members of our community, right, than they were about pointing out that you are watering down what it actually means to be a citizen. And that is a necessary component within a free society. And so I almost, a part of me, like the dark side of me wonders, the black pill side of me wonders. I found it interesting on Ole Miss and on UNC Chapel Hill, where two fraternities get out there and kind of launch a counter protest. One standing up in defense of the flag, them attempting to move the American flag, and they raised like hundreds of thousands of dollars for their fraternities practically overnight. And one of the things that that I think signaled to me was, first of all, if you're a fraternity, I can't see one of these fraternities doing this 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
They would have been quiet. They would have, if anything, they would have done some sort of, they either would have shut up completely or they would have written some sort of milquetoast letter on behalf of the fraternity in support of whoever they were told the oppressed victims were, right? And that would have been it. They would have just kept their head down and weathered the storm. But you saw more of them now standing up and going, no, this is crap. And not only am I going to stand up to it, I'm going to mock it, right? Because I'm just done. And they were rewarded for it. Which means other people watching this on other campuses are recognizing, oh, we're not alone in thinking this is insanity.
Yeah.
And so I think more young men, and this was predominantly young men, right? These were fraternities. I think young men are starting to recognize that when we talk about all of the culturally shaping institutions that have been aligned against masculinity or conservatism or what else, I think young men are starting to realize you are also a culturally shaping institution, and you don't have to put up with this crap. And once they start to recognize this in force, I think it could actually be enough to stop a violent act from taking place, because I think they're going to be shocked to find out how many allies they have. I think they're also, this is the part where, again, my co-host Christian kind of disagrees with me on this on some level, but I think they're also going to recognize how many young women out there actually appreciate the fact that young men are standing up going, this is nonsense and we're not putting up with it.
The political talk cannot be avoided. He is a politician after all. But there were two things I found very interesting in this video. One is the usage of certain terms that we're very used to hearing are just bandied about in a very casual fashion. You heard pill terminology. And the second one is you're going to hear them speak of the mouse utopia. In this conversation between a gentleman who has a very large social media presence on doing alternative history what ifs, and a sitting member of the Virginia state legislature.
Why do you come to the conclusion that if mouse utopia is true, that won't happen? If it isn't true, it will?
So with mouse utopia, the female mice became masculine, male mice became effeminate. You had crowds of autistic mice that couldn't socialize. You had gangs of sociopathic mice who would kill others. And I'm constantly comparing our era of history to other eras of history. And there's a couple parallels to our era, which don't really exist in previous eras. And one of it is just the insane collapse of the birth rate, where if current trends continue, there will be 4 Koreans or 6 Koreans, 4 Koreans for every 100 Koreans alive today at the end of this century. There's no historic parallel to that. The current degree of feminism, no historic parallel. The West trying to commit civilizational degrowth. A lot of my channel is discussing 2 independent crises our society has. Those 2 are the political civil war crisis I've talked about, and the second one is the population mental health crisis. And I think these would have happened independently of the other. And so if we're going to use the logic of the rest of history, what would happen here is the right wins. And this is a really red-pilled statement, but you can determine who is in power in your society based off who young women support. Young women will always support the most powerful party in a society. And one of my favorite history books, Sex and Power and History by Amaury de Riancourt, he said that in most societies, young women are the most conservative element, except in revolutions. Once the revolution gets strong enough, young women are the most vociferous supporters of the revolution.
I found this conversation fascinating for several reasons. All of the politics aside, these 2 gentlemen are worried that in the next 6 months, many young men are going to be unhappy with what happens politically. That's something for other people to discuss. I'm not really here to discuss that. But what they are saying is that the tide may be on the verge of turning. I don't know if I believe that or not, but it's a conversation that they're having in the open forum, and it's getting 100,000 views in 2-3 days. And so this is not a view that is being held by a small number of people. And the usage of pill terminology and the mouse utopia is clear evidence that whatever it is that we have been talking about, or what people have been talking about long before I started making videos, are not just tucked away in a small corner anymore.
I could see a scenario where people start to geographically self-sort in a very, very meaningful way. So it's, I'm not moving to Florida because it's sunny. I'm moving to Florida because they're not going to allow this insanity, and I want to help them not allow this insanity. By the same token, you're going to have people going, I'm leaving Texas because they won't allow me to trans my kid, right? So I'm going to California. And so you see a geographical self-sorting that takes place where now you actually engage in what the states were meant to be on some level, which was laboratories of democracy, or in this case, it would be far more cultural laboratories taking place, where I think you could provide a relatively safe and stable environment where, again, young women living in that state, you know, getting married younger or whatnot, or whatever it is, say, yeah, I like I want to be a mother. I want to run a family. It doesn't mean I don't want to, you know, do things professionally or whatnot, but I do not share the animosity toward men or toward motherhood that these other women do. And I want to go to the place where that's going to be rewarded, not punished.
Nick Freitas is using the terms self-sorting, but we know two other synonyms for self-sorting: SYSBM and Passport Bros. And like BGS Ibmore always says, it is the environment that is the shaper of female woman's behavior. And the environment is changing. How quickly it's going to change, we don't know. But we do know that the environment is going to be the determining factor in the kind of young ladies that we can find to build families with. And as the environment is one that does not support family, young ladies are going to do what they want to do with their bodies and take pills and lay down with who they like, as long as they are allowed to do so. But when the environment changes, or better yet, if men go to environments where the environment is such that young ladies aren't doing that and they are trying to build families and they do want to have kids and stay with their husbands, I'm pretty sure that's going to be a strong indicator for where the men are going to go. I don't know the timeline, but I do know that people in state legislatures are talking about some of the same things that BGS Ibmore speaks on regularly. Interesting times. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below. Catch you next video. Take care, guys.